This is Inner Healing Paths podcast. Here we discuss the healing of the mind, body, soul, and spirit through a variety of different paths. We have emotional and spiritually minded conversations centering on ancestral healing, psychology, astrology, yoga, meditation, magic, and indigenous spiritual practices of the world. I am your host, Rosa Shetty, and I am so happy you are here. Welcome. Welcome, Prisca, to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me again.
Yeah, of course. No, I was so excited when I found out you're having your second book coming out, and then I was so blessed to get an advanced audio copy from you, and then it just worked out that the publisher sent me a copy also. So I have both. So it's been awesome reading your book, and I'm just so excited for this conversation.
Amazing. Yeah, I see the book behind you. That's
Yes,
so
I
cool.
wanted to make sure that it's visible.
Yes, I have mine somewhere up there, but I feel like it gets lost.
Yes, so I have the other one here.
Yeah,
The first one also sent by your publisher, by
I
the way.
love it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's lovely to have you. How you been? How's everything going for you? You've been busy.
It's like getting in the grind of press and just talking about it a lot. You don't realize when you're writing it that you have to talk about it at some point. And you'd think I would be used to it after the first one, but I'm not. I'm like, oh my God, what do you mean? What inspired it? Hold on, let me figure it out.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah,
getting back into it for sure.
absolutely. I mean, I'm sure just the writing process in and of itself to get back to writing, I'm sure that was another, ordeal. Because I mean, I've heard from other people, it's hard to, once you finish one and you enjoy that process to start again, it could be a little challenging.
Heck yes. And it's like it's been about a year since I submitted the manuscript. So it's also like revisiting a story that I'm done telling and now picking it up because people are going to start reading it too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. And before we jump into the book, do you mind sharing a little bit about, for the folks that don't know you? I think most people that listen to my podcast and follow me, I think they know you. But just for the folks that don't, do you mind sharing a little bit about yourself and the work that you do?
Yeah, my name is Prisca Dorcas Mojica Rodriguez. I am an author, a public speaker, feminist. I run the page Latina Rebels. I started it 11 years ago, so it's a pretty long time now. And I've always been really passionate about making accessible academic theory. And so that is sort of the mission of Latina Rebels, and it turned into a writing career by accident, truly. And so this is my second book that I've written, Tias and Primas. My first book is for brown girls with sharp edges and tender hearts, a love letter to women of color. But I continue to
Mhm.
sort of repackage and find new ways to explain theory to a primarily Latina audience.
I know, and I think you make a great job at doing so. Just because I mean, I consider myself someone that reads a lot, but I think when I read your first book for brown girls, there were terms that I wasn't aware of, because I'm not in that field or in academics, per se. So yeah, absolutely. It opens the door to a lot of terms and concepts that we wouldn't know of just on a day-to-day basis. Or even if you read, like I read a lot, and I learned a lot from your first book and this one. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, it is such a I think theory has the power to really liberate some minds, but it stays so hard to have access to. And even like you said, if you're in one field, we're not very interdisciplinary in academia. So if you got a graduate degree in one field, doesn't mean you studied another whole other field that probably would be great in conversation with your field, but people are just like not even thinking about it. So I think for me, I'm very interdisciplinary. And so I had to go outside of my own program to get this knowledge because I was also just like thirsty for it. I was like, ka-ching, give me more. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The intersectionality of everything, right? I don't think when I was in college, like maybe 2005, I don't think that was a term that I heard back then. I hope that now, again, I'm not in academia, so I don't know, but I hope that now is something that students know about, because this is definitely what you talk about.
Yeah.
Your book are there's everything is interconnected, healing, mental health, and feminism and womanism. Everything is connected in politics, and so much more. But yeah, I feel that this wasn't something that was talked about 15 or 20 years ago when I was in school.
Yeah. And even now, as it's become more conversational, people don't know like the origins of imposter syndrome is a mental health term. People don't know things like that. And so they think they could just be Delulu and not think about imposter syndrome, and so it can't affect them. And it's like, no, that's like saying you could pray away depression. Like it's systemic, it's bigger, it's affecting the way that our brain like talks to itself. Like, no, that's not how it works. So yeah, even things that have become more conversational, people don't know where it comes from, who created the term, why did they create the term. So it's also bringing that language to people.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Prisca, let's talk about your new book. And I'm just so curious. I know you've probably been asked this a million times, but I'm just so curious about how you feel that your book, this one, and for the folks that have read the previous one, how do you feel that is maybe a continuation, um, or is it, or maybe is it how does it relate to the previous one, or is it completely different than what
Oh
you?
my gosh. Nobody's asked me this. I feel
Oh,
like
okay.
no nobody wants to talk about the first book. Everybody wants to focus on this whole other project like it stands alone. And I don't feel like it does. I feel like my first book, I showed my reader everything. It sort of felt like I remember leading up to it how anxious I got because it was like preparing to sort of undress in a public setting because it was just revealing wounds and just deep, deep, dark stuff that I was still actively working through in therapy. And this book is sort of like, all right, I did it. I did it myself. Now I need you to do that. And so it does sort of turn the mirror to the audience and it says, like, this isn't just happening to me. This is happening to your mom. It's happening to your abuelita. It's happening to your tias, to your primas. It's like all around you and it's affecting you. So this was like okay, I was looking at myself in the mirror and really talking about some dark stuff. And then I turn the mirror around and I'm like, all right, we could just focus on my stuff, but also, are you ready to focus on you now?
I love that. Yeah, and I mean, you do share a lot about yourself in the second book, but I could see that. I hadn't thought about it like that. That you have turned the mirror to us. Yeah, and that's exactly what it. I mean, I listened to the book, and I was able to read some of the chapters that I feel like I needed a little bit more. You know how sometimes you listen to something and then you're like, let me read this. Let
Yeah.
me really understand this. And yeah, there's a lot of what I gathered from your book as a reader was just the how unaware we are of the the women around us, and what they bring, what they bring in terms of what they have to offer in enrichment of our lives, even from when we're a child to now as an adult. And then just a deep compassion for them, even the ones that I didn't like too much growing up. When I was reading the descriptions of particular one, I'm like, oh, this is so and so. I'm like, okay, this is how she enriched my upbringing, and I had more compassion for her. Yeah. So
Yeah, I think it was like, and maybe, I mean, you probably experienced this, like when somebody starts therapy, There, at least for me, I was like, ah, everyone sucks. And I'm just like, amazing. And then it took like probably a year that I was like, am I the drama? Like, it's been me all along. But it's that realization that when you realize things about yourself, you also start to become really compassionate. It's like a third eye. Like you start to see around you, like, oh, you're not a bitch, you're hurt. You're not angry someone's done something to you. Like you're now able to process what's happening inside you. Like you're able to sort of see things a little differently. And so you do move with more compassion and less willingness to like indict people as like you're a good person and you're a bad person. It's so much more complicated than that.
Oh yeah, I know absolutely, and I think that's what I appreciate about, especially the opening chapter, matriarch. I was very touched by that, just because I also have an abuelita, well, two abuelitas that are Rosa. That's why I'm Rosa, and my mom is Rosa. So I have like I'm surrounded by Rosas, and they also died when I was very young, and they also were very complicated, in terms of how they came across to us as children, and so I was very touched by that, and I'm just wondering for you, how was and with the understanding of that, what you know about your where you come from and your grandparents and your grandma, and then where you're at now in your life. How was that for you to process that, and also the tenderness that, and then the nostalgia, and then the healing that for me that chapter evoked.
You cut off. Sorry.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I just didn't hear the last part of that
Yeah, no, I was
sentence.
wondering how was that for you, to with all those feelings that evoked in me. I'm sure, navigating that for you and concising that into into a chapter. How was that process for you?
It was really, I mean, I think the matriarch chapter is still hard for me to read through. And I'm getting ready to, go on tour and people are asking me to prepare a reading. And it's one of the ones that I struggle the most to read through because I think she died when I was 15 and it was so catastrophic. Her death was so, it was like, I don't even know how to explain it. It was like a massive casualties. Like it's like one of those really impactful, like it felt like no one else died, but everyone was impacted and everyone was sort of bleeding out. And I knew what was happening because it was like me mommy, like she just wouldn't get up some days, or she would just be washing dishes and crying. She was just like wasn't okay for maybe a year, maybe 2 years. And I don't feel like I got to grieve that because it was so confusing to hold all that. I knew I was sad, but I didn't get to go to Nicaragua when it happened because it happened so quick. And then my mom was over there and she stayed around for the funeral and the burial. And so I saw videos of it, but it didn't feel real. It only started to feel real for me in 2016 when I went back to Nicaragua. Was the first time that I was like, oh my gosh, she's gone. I went to her house and it was just dark. They weren't turning on lights. They didn't have a lot of her family pictures she had hanging up. She just like had love into every corner of her house and it just felt different. I was suddenly really aware that the walls were green. I was like, I never even, I think, saw the walls before. And I was just like, were they always this color? This house just feels different. And so like that, like it was the first time that I started to be like, oh, she's gone and she's not going to be back again. Like we just lost this person. And so me writing all that, I got to sort of move through all that. And I got to, like I say in the book, I got to like breathe her scent again. I got to like picture her house the way that I want it to always look in my memories, not like what I went back to visit. And I got to talk about the things that her dying did teach me, which was like, don't don't pour so much of yourself that you got nothing left, because that is what happened to her at 55 is young. young, and she was like the favorite abuelita. We were not supposed to have favorites, but she was my favorite abuelita. And so that, like, I got to really grieve through it. As I read it every time, I'm also grieving through it because I'm like, it was catastrophic. And I got to put that down into words. And I feel like I tried to do the best that I could to really get at the heart of the book with her.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, and you did. I mean, if it's the sense of you really don't know what you have until it's gone. It's that's the, it's like no one knew how hard it was going to be until she was gone. And that's the thing for the archetype that you talk about, matriarchs. That's what it is. They give and give and give, and everyone takes. And then when they're gone, everyone's like scrambling, like, what do we do now? And that's the part that I really felt, because I have that in my family, in my lineage, and yeah, and I just deeply felt that one. Yeah.
Yeah, and it sort of, I, at least for me rereading it, it does sort of shake me every time. I'm like, oh God,
Yeah.
like people have to feel this over and over again. I know so many of my friends have that like pillar in their families, and it's just like it's so earth shattering to think how many of us are gonna have to grieve that loss at some point if we haven't already.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we all have to go through it if we have someone that amazing,
Yeah.
part of life. But yeah, I love that chapter. And the other one that really touched me for different reasons was La Tía Escandalosa.
Yes.
That one really, and I know that that's the reason for that, and I just and I want to hear what you have to say. But the reason for that is just there's a sentence in the book where you talk about the to be careful not to be wing clippers. I think I wrote it down when, yeah, when we become expert wing clippers. So that made me wonder, and then I went back to reading the book. And I'm like, how many of us would be Tia Escandalosas if we didn't get our wings clipped? Who knows, at what point in our life? So that touched me, because it's like maybe we would all be like this, the life of the party, feeling the music, feeling the energy of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I talk a lot about my mom's whole identity has been to be respectable and very, she wants to be respected. And so in that, which is like everybody wants to do that, right? But I think it was like her whole positioning in life has been that, at the expense of losing parts of herself. And I think she became an expert wing clipper for me. My inner dialogue, my worst critic sounds like mi mami. And I have to like check that because it also se me sale. Like my sister will do something fun and lighthearted. She's the only, so I don't know about your family, but we're not a nude family. Like we don't walk around in the nude.
Yeah,
Like
no.
I've never seen my mom naked. She's never seen me naked, but my sister does. And me mommy would be like cochina. And just like, but that's like wing clipping. Like she has not harbored shame over her naked body. And you're trying so hard to do it. And then she was visiting me once. It was just me and her, and she came out naked. And I was like, ew. Pero se me salió, and I didn't want to. And I've always known since I was little how cool it was that she could do that. Pero se me salió. And it's that, like, you don't even realize when you're around wing clippers how quickly you too start adapting some of that language, and it just will come out of you. It might come out of you on your kids, on your siblings, on your nieces and nephews, nibblings, but it'll come out of you. So yeah, I do believe so many of us are just being raised to have a caution in the world, to survive the world and not thrive in it. And I think that that's how we become these wing clippers.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially as an oldest daughter, I'm an oldest daughter also, so it's almost like we get that we're the buffer almost for our siblings
Yes.
before they learn better, hopefully.
Yeah, yeah. Like the one they figure out how to, it's like they put everything on us. And then they like figure it out eventually that it maybe we don't need everything, but then we already got it all, so it's in us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember our last conversation when we were talking about your book for brown girls. That book was very much about talking to your inner child and connecting with that part, and amongst all very difficult and complicated topics. But at the heart of it, it was that conversation. And I'm wondering for you, did your inner child have a role in this book? Did it come out, the little Prisca come out in writing this book?
I think you sense it. I think you can sense it the most in Tu Tía la Loca. I wrote with a lot of anger for like 5, 6, 12-year-old. Even, when I got married, I was 21. So like all those versions of me that was aspiring to be the perfect prima. I was really aspiring to just behave, have people see me in the ways that my mommy wants to see me, in the way that when people talk to her, they said good things about me. Like I operated with that objective. It made me proud when people complimented them for how they raised me in front of me. And then sort of everything shattered for me, and I like burnt the whole house down, and metaphorically. So I sort of said I don't want to be that girl anymore. I tried everything to be that girl, but it's not working. Like my life is in shambles. And I thought if I just did everything they told me to do, it would work, and it didn't. So there was anger, there was deep resentment. There's like a lot of like, it's like dignified anger in that chapter, where it's like, how dare you? How dare you now push me aside because I'm no longer something your fellow parishioners at church will tell you está haciendo muy buenas cosas la Priscila. Instead, they're like, ooh, have you read Priscila's new book? And my parents don't like that. So I am sort of cast aside in my family. And there was a lot of that anger as I'm writing all that, because it's the consequences that I was warned would have happened in terms of my family. And so it's like the realization, you weren't wrong, but also you could not act this way. You could change things. You could accept me. You're choosing not to, because las apariencias.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And with your family, did they have any comments about this book? Because I know it's the spotlight is not so much on them, but it is. And I know you mentioned in the book that you're describing different people, but they're a combination, amalgamation of actually different women that you've met. But I'm just curious if they said, "Oh, you're talking about so and so," or well, uh,
I
I.
wish. They don't read me. They didn't read the first one. They're not interested in the second one. They act like I don't have a job, and it's like an unspoken thing. We'll talk about everything but that. So it's like one of those like silencing techniques that is like what you're saying. To acknowledge it is to give it credence, to give it power that we don't think it has, because we don't think what you're doing is important.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of women experience that regard, for you it's writing, but it could be for other things when you're doing something great. A lot of times, other women in your life or the people closest to you, they may not be the most supportive, of anything you do because they're not used to that version of you or they're not used to the growth and the expansion of you. So they won't even acknowledge it.
Exactly. And it sucks. And it is something that I was sort of, we're not talking at the moment, or we talk whenever they need me to do something. But yeah, we're sort of, I'm taking space because of that, because I'm sort of sick of the not acknowledging it. And I'm sick of like being allowing that to continue by giving them access to me on their terms. So we're going through a stage they're not very happy with, but that is giving me more peace over it all. Yeah.
And I was going to ask you because I always ask this question, but for you, in terms of your own personal healing journey and your own personal expansion and growth, how did this second book move that along for you? How did that push that healing journey for you?
It's the compassion part always I go back to, because I have sat in, I went too quickly. Like you go through the pain and then I over intellectualized it, but I never felt it. And so I've been in the feeling stage of it. And in the feelings, I find compassion, I find anger. And so it's that place that I'm writing from. It's like my material is coming from those like conflicts within myself. I also found that I have stuff that I need to work through in the book. It felt most prominent in the Pretty Prima. There's wounds for me there because I have intellectualized the ways that my cultura has said, sos fea porque sí, porque te ves como India. I've intellectualized it, but I haven't felt it. And I felt it writing it in the way that I was not giving that prima any compassion. And I was like, no, 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 yeah. No, 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 no. You need to step back. You need to go talk about this. You need to go feel this more before you can write about this, because you're not seeing this person as somebody who's being hurt by these systems also. Because all you're seeing is, how come I wasn't ever gonna be that? And how come you squandered it? So it's like recognizing that too. Like as you're writing these kinds of books, you have to sort of be willing to say, hey, that's not what you're supposed to be writing here. Yeah.
Oh no, thank you for sharing that. And and there's a chapter in your book about ghosts, and I think that's the title of it, right? La tía que hunt-
Yeah.
Yeah, who's a ghost. Uh, so folks that know me, they know that I love anything supernatural and extraterrestrial and everything that is that is not of this world. So when I read that book, that chapter in your book, I just loved it so much because it put into words how I grew up also listening to these ghost stories. And so I was wondering if you're open to sharing a little bit about that chapter. I really like that one for that reason because I love all the supernatural stuff. But I wonder how it was for you and to reminisce about the stories that you heard growing up and how has that informed how you are now and how you approach the supernatural now as an adult.
Yeah. So I write about a few versions of the archetype, and I grew up with ghost stories, like really normalized ghost stories. Like men shared ghost stories, women shared it was just like a very open space. And I remember certain ghost stories more than others, and it kind of had to do with the storyteller. But I just knew everybody saw ghosts. I just understood. Mi mommy's the one that relatives say goodbye to her specifically. So I also knew that it was different. Every tia had their own like special talent with the ghosts. Like some of them saw energy. Like I had a tia who was like, I can smell depression. So it's like that. Like the supernatural just felt like nobody was like laughing at them. Everybody was like, oh, okay, put it in my back pocket for later when I need this information. So I just grew up with that being so accepted and so normalized and even beloved in the community that it was shocking to see that other communities don't have that. I mean, it really is still shocking to me. Um, I have a ghost in this house. And I remember the first time I saw him, I was like to my partner, I was like, obviously you've seen the man who lives here. And he was like, what do you what do
Well,
you neurologically, are you okay? Like it was like he went somewhere extreme that I was like, wait, you should be you should be celebrating my talent. And he's not evil, so I could tell you we're safe. Like I had this whole moment where I was like, what? You didn't grow up with ghost stories? What is wrong with you? So for me, that was one of the things I was like, it's such a unique, I think, global South experience, but also like Latina, very particular Latina experience that I just wanted to write about it. And I thought it was so, I also like, because it's theory. I'm always reading theory and I'm always bringing theory into this. And people who write about ghost encounters in academia basically say, we don't know. We don't have words for it. And that's okay. Like, why take somebody's reality away for the sake of just saying it doesn't logically make sense to me? And that was kind of really cool approach to social sciences in general. So ultimately at the end, what I end up saying is that I hearing ghost stories was formative to my, like, I'm a storyteller today because I grew up hearing ghost stories. I get paid and have make a living out of telling stories because I grew up with them as normal, and I grew up with like, it was play. It was how adults played in my community, and it was fun, and I love talk radio. I still sort of, my peak enjoyment is listening to stories. So I'm like, they exist and they're vibrant and it's fun, even if just for the fun of it. We are like sharing intimate parts of ourselves and showing off our skills and getting better at it. I've heard saying ghost stories just get told better and better throughout the years. The details get really like specific and you're just there. You could picture it. You're like, at the end, you'll be like, that was a great story, man. Like that's a cool element, I think, of our community that doesn't get written about without it being a little ridiculous or made fun of or infantilized because it's associated with women. So it felt like a moment to just like hold it for what it was and what it isn't, and acknowledging that we just don't understand why that's happening, but it's still beneficial to grow up as a kid in that community.
Yeah, it's part of your it's, I think, for kids listening to those stories, if you tell a scary story to any kid, they love it.
Yeah.
5, 6 young ones, they love those scary stories, and it's because of the element of, like anything else, like fairies. Like they love stories about fairies and mermaids. It goes along the same lines of something that is not of this world, and kids love that. And I think I feel very lucky to have grown up also listening to these stories. And I have a 4-year old, and I like to talk to her about not necessarily scary stories, but like about fairies, and I just make up stuff. But she loves it, and but no one else does it around me because everyone, they don't believe in ghosts or whatever it is. So I found that I'm the only one that's doing that. So that's why I was able to really relate to that specific chapter, because I've had my fair share of supernatural stuff also at my house, and I've seen things and I felt things, and I'm like the only one that is like you said. I talked to my husband. I'm like, this is what happened last night, and this is what I heard, and I went to get you. And I had a very scary experience. I thought somebody broke into my house. It was that real and vivid. And
Oh.
cameras were checked, and I heard the voice of a man. I heard the whole thing. I was even like,
Mm.
in, um in my room. I was sleeping with my daughter, so that woke me up. My dogs were barking, the whole thing. And I woke up and I thought someone broke in. So in my daughter's room, I was trying to reach for something to defend myself, because I immediately went into fight or flight mode. And I said, oh my God, my husband's in another room. I'm by myself, like someone's in the house. And I was scrambling to find something. No, and I heard the voice, and then of course after I get to my husband and the whole thing, and he's like, "You probably were dreaming." I'm like, "No, I was not dreaming about this. I'm having a real." So I understand. I totally understand what you mean. It's like, I think that if I was to share this with my grandma, who shared these stories with me, she would have been like, "Oh my God, yes, this is what
Yeah.
happened."
Yeah. Tell me more. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So that I love that about our culture. I love that we embrace, this the other, how can I say, like the other world, right? The other side that we don't really know about. And like you said, a lot. I interviewed an author here. He wrote he's a therapist by trade, and he wrote a book about this and his encounters with other entities while he's doing therapy. And he even developed a whole protocol to work with these entities in psychotherapy. So he was on the podcast, and he mentioned a few researchers in sociology, in sociology and anthropologists. And he said the same thing. Is like they reference these elements and these entities, but they say we don't know. And he did that in his book too. He's like, this is what it is. We don't know, but I work with it.
Yeah. It's like, I think one of the quotes I use is like, I think we lack the vocabulary for explaining this, and that's mainly an us problem. That's not the entity or the spirits or anything's problem. It is just a lack of vocabulary. And I was like, I love that. I love that. So my ridicule, because it does sometimes become ridiculous, and it is a point of contention when you're outside of the community, or when I think when we're in the US more, because I call it like trying to play American, trying to play because it is like that. You go back to Latin America, it's normal, it's talked about, it's okay, it's not funny, it's a thing. It feels here in the diaspora, as we're being interacting with other cultures, and specifically white culture as a dominant, that we start to like lose, I think, and disconnect from something that feels vital to like who we are as people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This particular author, he for his research, he went to Brazil. He was in Brazil for a while, and in psychiatric hospitals there, they have spiritualists. I think that's what he called them, spiritualists. And he had, trained doctors and therapists. But the role for the spiritualists were to handle that for a lot of the inpatient psychiatric patients, to handle that side of their healing. And he just found it fascinating that other cultures embrace this as a part of who we are as humans and part of their healing. But here it's not even like, if we talk about it in a clinical setting or in an inpatient psychiatric hospital, like, what are you, what's wrong with
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just, I find all that fascinating.
Very fascinating. Very fascinating. Yeah. And unspoken. It still feels so not talked about here, because we
Oh,
do sort of keep it within our circles.
yeah, no, it definitely isn't. But hopefully things will change,
Yeah.
but I do want to go back to, and I know we're running out of time, but I do want to go back to so you traced a matriarch in the making in your book.
Yeah.
And until you mention it in the book, I didn't see it. Like, I didn't put it together. But then when you mention it at some point in the book, I'm like, oh my God, that is so true. This is how it is. How did you put all those thoughts together? For it to, and then I'll let you share what the connections are. But how did you come up with that, the matriarch in the making?
Yeah, I think it was a few the dignified Tia is definitely a matriarch in the making. I talk about the perfect Prima as a matriarch in the making. I also think the street smart Prima is a matriarch and somehow in the making too. She's just like manifests herself maybe a little less cookie cutter than the perfect Prima, but it's like still very respected and very valued in the community. But it's just like this path you take, and it is sort of like very heteronormative. It is very the standards of like the gender roles feel very overt, but also not. There's gender bending stuff happening, but there's also like, they're gonna show respeto to their husbands in front of a group of people. There's like little things around like, I'm gonna be the best. I'm gonna be the best, and being the best girl I can be means getting married, having kids, then having grandkids, but in that order. It's all like the order of things that feels very patriarchal, very sexist in some ways, but they almost make an identity out of their suffering. They make an identity out of the position that life has put them in, and then they just get so good at it that no one can imagine them not being there. But they also is like I've met a lot of silent matriarchs, a lot of very obvious that you're the matriarch, but your husband might still be alive and everybody just pretends that it's both of you or him more, but like nobody talks about it's that like she allows that to happen because that's again enseñando respeto, like there's a lot of that happening, but it is like the pressure to hold it all together, the first often to do a lot of things, the bravest, like there's like a TikTok like I don't want to be God's bravest soldier anymore. I feel like the matriarch in the making is God's bravest soldier every time it rains. And it rains a lot, but it is the one who's always going to be okay, the dependable one. And that I think manifests in these particular archetypes more than others.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. And also, I think I shared in my stories at some point, and I think you commented on it about how I felt like I could relate to HY as I was reading. I'm like, I have parts of her and I have parts, at different
Same.
points in my life. I could see myself being like la prima perfecta. And then, you know, um, and for you, I don't know, is this something that for the, if you've talked to other people that have read your book and other
Yeah.
women for you, is that that's
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's also like kind of the fun of it. For me, I say like I feel like I'm all of them or at least 17 of them. But like there is it's part of ourselves. It's the people who raise us. So of course like they like implanted put into us purpose and light and rebellion. They planted these little seeds and they all sort of blossom. But yeah, as I've been doing interviews, a lot, every Latina specifically who I've been interviewed by is like, I'm all of them. I was like, yeah, isn't that awesome?
yeah,
That's kind of the point. Is like if I just like it feels like I just pulled like what is the cheese string? I feel like I was pulling at cheese strings, but they were essentially just one cheese string. Like it's us. We're that complicated. We're that I think that's I got to make us into our fullness instead of sort of these stereotypes that we get put into. Because heck yeah, I hold so much in me, and I know we all do too.
we all do. Yeah, yeah. And I feel like that's what I loved about your book is that you showed how complex we really are and how different we are, and at the same time how we all are, que somos todas somos iguales. It's like we're the same, but we're, so complex and beautiful. And how can you not feel compassion, for each and every, for each of these parts? And as in my work, I'm a therapist and I work with parts therapy. So what you just shared totally resonates with that because there's different parts within us that show up when they need to. We could be the streets. I'm sure a lot of us could be street smart if we need to, and maybe some are better than others, but we can take care of what we need to take care of. And I love that, that it really is a mirror of all of us, about who we each are and the stories that really make up our families and us. So I love that. Yeah.
Yes, I'm glad. I feel like that's the point. My biggest fear is that people will read it and be like, "Oh, the perfect prima is so much more than that." Or my tia who sees fantasma is also the childless tia or whatever. But I'm like, yeah, I think what
Point.
I'm trying to say is that I pulled from a lot. And as I'm writing, I say, like, I'm sort of like this. I've been like this. I'm also like this. So I'm trying to let the reader know that I'm not trying to put us in that hole and bury us. I am trying to like expand the vernacular, not limit it for
Yeah.
sure.
Great job with that. And one thing I want to highlight for the readers is that there's when I was listening to the book, I would hear you quote different maybe researchers or academics, in the field, and then you would go into a story, And when I read the book, and I was curious when I was listening, I was like, I wonder how this looks in a book format in terms of, because usually we get quotes at the beginning of the chapter and then it goes on, right? But you had quotes throughout the chapter, to reference what you were talking about, and almost as a way to say, like, this is a societal issue that has been studied in academia. So I just want to bring that up because I love that. I don't know if other people have done it. It's the first time I read it, like I read a book like that has it throughout the chapter.
It's also like my attempt at, like, there's this idea that we're here, normal people are here, and theory's over here. And I'm just like, as someone who really likes theory, it's because of how I saw it applied to things I already knew to be true, because it was like data to back up experience that I already like lived, raw, very real things that I could attach like things to. So much of me doing this is showing the reader, you can read theory. You already know it. You live it. You breathe it. These are just the books that talk about it and bring it, like, give it science, but also like we're doing it with or without that knowledge. So it was sort of integrating all this research to say, like, you got theory. This is theory. It's everything that you're experiencing around you.
Wonderful. Well, Prisca, it was such a pleasure and honor to have you here on the podcast. And thank you for sharing your stories and for putting this work out for us to enjoy and learn. For the folks that would like to follow you or learn more about you, where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm Prisca Dorcas on every social media platform. Don't look for me on Twitter because I'm just doing stuff that I probably shouldn't. But it's not very good. So don't look there. But yeah, I'm on everywhere on social media. Um I try to keep my personal life on books now more than social media. So if you follow me, it'll just be to know about my dog and what I'm touring, and
I love it.
that's my separation now. Yeah, yeah.
Love it. And I know your book is actually coming out a week from today, next Tuesday.
Yes,
Uh,
yeah.
so everyone needs to go get the book. And I'm thinking of releasing this episode that day because
Yes.
my husband is the one that does all the editing. So I was thinking today, I'm like, I need to tell him to like hurry up with this one.
I'm dead. No, that's perfect.
Yeah, and I mean, and people can pre-order it, of course, but by the time this comes out, the book will be available online. So yeah, wonderful. Okay, please, it was lovely to talk to you, and I look forward to interviewing you again for the third book.
Yes. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it.
That's wonderful. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I hope that you found it healing and nourishing to your mind and soul. If there's a friend that you think would benefit from listening to this information, please share it. Share about our podcast. If you feel called to, please leave us a review, as this really, really helps boost our presence here in Apple Podcast, and it makes it easier for others to find us. To stay up to date on new episode releases and special events and projects that I'm working on, you can follow us on Instagram at Inner Healing Paths Podcast. And you can subscribe to my newsletter by going to my website, which is rosachettilcsw.com. And I will include this information and links in the show notes. Once again, thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to sharing with you again next time.